Tracy Mommy Reads. So today I am going to be doing something a little bit different. Let me pull my stuff up here. So I did a video once about a book I read and a movie that I watched, and like how I felt the adaptation, you know, how it measured up. And it was just for one book, and I think it was The Last Letter from Your Lover. And I think on some of my Q&As or booktube questions videos, I may have like kind of mentioned stuff about book adaptations I thought were good, or, you know, something along those lines, or movies that I wanted to watch that were based on books. But what I'm going to do today is delve into that a little bit deeper, because, you know, overwhelmingly, the majority of book readers, book lovers, say that the book is always better than, you know, any movie or TV adaptation that could be made. And I think a big part of that has to do with the fact that in the books, there's a lot more detail that's given. And even with all of that detail, often it's left up to the reader's imagination. You know, it gets our imagination churning. You know, if an author describes someone as having, you know, skin the color of mocha or eyes blue as the sky, everybody's going to have a different character in mind when they think of that. So that's why, like, you know, in recent times, whenever somebody's been cast in a role in a movie, people get all up in arms because that's not the person they saw in their head, you know? And then also with movies, a lot of times they have to edit a bunch of stuff out to, you know, fit that running time. You know, they got to have that running time. They can't, like, you know, do every single line and every single page in the book, or the movie will end up being, you know, like 5 or 6 hours. And then you have the ones who do the most egregious of things. They add stuff or take away stuff that was, you know, in the book. And you're like, okay, wait a minute, where'd this character come from in this TV show? Or why didn't this character die? Or why didn't this, you know? So again, that's why a lot of us as book lovers, you know, say that we enjoy the book more, because I mean, it's in its true essence, in its true form, untouched, right? Well, what I'm going to be talking about today is I'm going to talk about 4 movies that I watched that I thought were really good movies that I did not even know they were based on books. You know, some of them I found out a little bit after I watched the movies, and others, like, I just found out like maybe last year that they were based on actual books. And I'm not even going to attempt to read the books, because I feel like, you know, once I've gotten a spoiler, it's one thing to read a book and you know how it ends, and then if you decide, and then they make a movie about it and you decide to watch it, and it's mostly for fact checking, like you just want to go see, okay, who did they have in mind for this character, or what did they leave out, or how did they, you know, convey that emotion or that plot twist. But typically, if you watch a movie and to go back and read the book, for me, I just feel like that's big spoiler. You already know how it ends, you know. Then the second part, I'm going to do books that I've read and movies that I've watched that I felt like they did a really good job, you know, adapting them to film or the small screen. So let's start off with 4 movies that I watched that had no idea they were based on books. Number 4, Mrs. Doubtfire. Yeah, the movie came out in 1993, and it starred Robin Williams, and he he was a divorced dad, and if I can recall, he was trying to spend more time with his kids, and their mom needed a nanny, so he went completely old lady drag and got the job, you know, being a nanny to his kids. And the book was called Alias, Madam Doubtfire by Anne Fine, and it was published in 1987, so like 6 years before the movie came out. I had no idea that that was based on a book until like last year, like the end of last year or sometime. Die Hard. Okay, that's really wild, right? Die Hard, starring Bruce Willis, that spawned a ton of sequels. Um, I think his name was John McClane in the movie. If that's not right, I'll put the correct name. But he his wife ends up on this flight, and it's like a hostage type situation, or these terrorists, and he ends up on the plane, and is trying to bring the bad guys down, or bring them to justice, or whatever. And it's so funny because it took place during the winter or during Christmas. In the movie, a lot of people, I think it's just for shits and giggles. They say it's a Christmas movie. But yeah, Die Hard with Bruce Willis. The movie came out in 1988. It's based on a book called Nothing Lasts Forever by Roderick Thorpe. And the book came out in 1979. Who would have thunk? Fight Club. And I found this out maybe a little bit after I had saw the movie. But again, no desire to go and read the book, even though it would be interesting to see. I wonder if like the twist that happens, like reading about it versus seeing it, because I think in the film it left a lot of us going, huh? Wait, what? And I wonder in the book if it would have been more of a like a, oh, I can't believe that happened type thing. But anyway, yeah, it's the movie came out in 1999 and the book came out in 1996. And it is a book by Chuck Palahniuk. I know I'm butchering his name. And then number one, Shawshank Redemption. I did not know that that was based on a book. And the book was by Stephen King. And it actually wasn't a book. It was a novella. So a short story. And it was called Rita Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption. It came out in 1982 and the movie was released in 1994. Movie starred Tim Robbins and Morgan Freeman. So now the next books that I wanted to highlight were books that were made into movies where I read both the book and saw the movie. The Notebook. And I know this is one of those movies that everybody has seen, but I actually read the book before it came out. The book by Nicholas Sparks, and the movie stars Ryan Gosling and Rachel McAdams. And I feel like they did a really good job with that adaptation. I mean, obviously there was a lot more detail in the book, but the casting and the way that the story was told, and when you finally realize, who's telling the story, I feel like nothing was really missing from the book. I feel like it did the book justice, so I was really pleased with that adaptation. Number 3, Bridges of Madison County. And this movie starred Meryl Streep and Clint Eastwood. And it was based on a book by Robert James Waller. And if I'm being honest, I enjoyed the movie more than I did the book. The book, it was a lot of hype around it, back in the day. And this was before all the social media. So there was still that book peer pressure where if you're at work and everybody's talking about this book, you don't want to be left out of the conversation. So I read the book and it was a little slow, And so when I heard that they were making a movie, I was like, why? I didn't feel like it was interesting enough in that it just drug on, and I had my own interpretations about what the wife was doing and this and that. But as with all the roles that she plays, where she totally embodies that character, Meryl Streep, she totally transformed that role and that character from anything that was written on those pages. It was a phenomenal performance, in my opinion. Number 2, Goodfellas. Yes, the movie starring Ray Liotta and Joe Pesci, Robert De Niro. It was actually a nonfiction book called Wise Guy by Nicholas Pileggi. And he was a journalist who had kind of chronicled the life of this mobster who was in witness protection, living in witness protection under the name Henry Hill. That wasn't his real name, obviously. But I always thought it was interesting because even when I was reading the book, I'm like, some of the things that he's telling, and I'm sure he was exaggerating, because even in the movie, it was kind of like everybody was larger than life and just so much. But I feel like maybe he was telling enough of the truth that if somebody was looking for him, wouldn't they have known that that was the person, you know, even though he was in witness protection? It was surprising to me that he was even allowed to do that book, you know, being in witness protection. It seemed like the government or whoever, WITSEC, that they wouldn't have let him, you know, put a book out like that. It seemed like it would have been like a threat to his security and whatever they had going on. But I'm trying to think, because that was so long ago. I don't know. Maybe he had already testified at this point. I think he had. So maybe at that point, but there's always, the way they tell it is like, you know, somebody that's left behind who may want to get revenge, you know, and a lot of those guys, those mafiosos and those mob bosses, you know, they have a reach outside of the prison. So even if you know, end up managing to testify against them for them to go to jail, I'd be afraid that there still will be some type of retribution. But anyway, it was a great movie with, you know, a stellar cast. So it was really good. I really enjoyed that movie. And number one, The Color Purple. Yes, The Color Purple, starring Whoopi Goldberg, you know, and Danny Glover, Oprah, you know, all of those. Margaret Avery, they were all, you know, in the movie as well. And it was a book written by Alice Walker. And that was one of the first books. I think that book came out in maybe 82 or 83. That was one of the first books that I read, like, that wasn't young adult or children's fiction or stories. You know, as a teenager, I'm like 12 or 13, probably had no business reading the book, but I did read it, and it kind of like made me fall in love with stories and, you know, with reading. That was one of the first books that kept me on a path where I have been consistently reading since that point. And I think that, you know, because there's some graphic stuff in the book, I was just like, how are they going to translate this to screen? It was only a few years after the book was, you know, published that the movie came out. So it was like 85, I think the movie came out, and the book was 82, 83. So that was a short window. I feel like the day that the book was published, you know, Steven Spielberg or whoever decided they were going to bring that to the screen, you know, the big screen. They must have been like, okay, let's start casting for this. We want to make this into a movie, because it was a very quick turnaround. You know, like I mentioned with some of the other books, like 5 or 20 years in some cases had passed before those books actually made it to film or to screen. And I will say, I was a little apprehensive, you know, knowing that Steven Spielberg was a great director, you know, having seen quite a few of his movies. I just was wondering how he would do justice to that movie. But he did that, you know, the direction, you know, and the cast and the set and the clothing, everything was so spot on and detailed, and it just really brought the book to life. And I have to say that even some of the characters, as I imagined them in my 13-year-old mind, I felt like, yeah, that's exactly what Sophia looks like, or that's exactly what I was imagining Celie would sound like, or whatever. So yeah, that I feel like they did a really, really good, amazing job with The Color Purple. So yeah, so those are some of the books that I've read and movies that I've seen, and movies that I've seen and books I've never read. So I'm just wondering, is there a book that was made into a film that you read the book and you saw the film, and what were your thoughts? Do you feel like they did it justice, or did they kind of ruin the book for you? And if you have seen a movie that's pretty popular that maybe the average person doesn't know it's based on a book, let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like this video, and go ahead, if you have not, subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much to all the people who have already subscribed. Y'all are the real MVPs. And I will be back next week with a review of the book, The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. I'm almost done, and it's really good so far. So I can't wait to talk to you guys about that next week. Have a great weekend. Bye.